welcome back to Push to Be More. I'm Sadaf Beynon, one of your co-hosts, and today we've got another great conversation about what it takes to make life work. Joining me today is our special guest, Amer Tadayon, and I'm excited for us to hear about his unique life experiences, the hurdles he's had to push through, the ways he recharges his spirit, and the steps he's taking to be more. In other words, it's all about push to be more. This episode is brought to you by PodJunction, where we're all about helping businesses share their stories and build real connections through the power of podcasting. Being part of the team at PodJunction, I've seen firsthand how podcasting can be a real game changer for reaching people and for making a real impact through meaningful conversations. Now, I know a lot of you listening are leaders and entrepreneurs, and if you're curious about what podcasting can do for you and your business, or if you're wondering where to even start, head over to podjunction.com. We'd love to help make the process clear and approachable for you. Podcasting offers a unique way to expand your reach and connect with your audience in ways that you may not have considered. And honestly, it's easier than you might think. So head on over to podjunction.com and see what podcasting can do for you. And now meet Amer. Amer is a modern day Renaissance man, an engineer turned tech innovator with pit stops as a Hollywood filmmaker and professional musician. Now he's shaking up video production with Lucihub, blending AI smarts with human creativity to make high quality content a breeze. With a knack for turning big ideas into bigger realities, Amer is all about investing in people and making business a bold, creative adventure. Amer, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sadaf. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's a real privilege to have you tonight.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, Amer, as you know, I run PodJunction, which is also the sponsor of this show. So the first question we ask our guests is if you had your own podcast, which I know you do have your own podcast, and you could invite anybody to be your guest, who would you invite and why?
Well, there's a lot of people I'd want to invite, but one that comes to mind is George Lucas. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you why, because he didn't set out to build an empire, no pun intended. He was a filmmaker. He wanted to bring his stories to life, and he did such a great job at that the side effect was these huge organizations that he managed to build along the way. And so I'd be really curious as an entrepreneur how he manages still being a creative and running a very large business, because they're typically not the same. And with my personal experience, it was once the company was underway, I was no longer really involved in the creative as much as I'd like to be. I was always running the business. I was in operations and finance and all this stuff that's not sexy and fun. And those aren't the reasons you typically start a company. Those are the things that happen if the company actually moves forward and is doing well. So.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I can see the parallels between your story and George Lucas's story as well.
Well, his story is grand compared to mine. Yeah. Lucihub is a good example. I started this business because I had this idea and I wanted to see it come to life. In the first probably 12 months, I was very involved in all of the product development, design, everything. And these days I'm not. These days I'm mostly involved in sales and capital raising and all the not so much fun things that go with having to build a business.
Yeah. So how do you cope with that? How do you navigate that?
I still make sure I'm involved at some level on the product side, but you also can't micromanage. So I've got an amazing team, and you let them do their job. And but I do give my feedback. I do give my input. I meet with them once a week just to get a checkup of what's going on and make sure that they're going in the direction I'd want the company to be going into. But I'm not nearly as involved, on the UX side of things or even in the architecture side of things. And so it's kind of it's interesting because I've noticed this pattern a couple of times in the businesses. So I'd be curious how somebody like George Lucas dealt with it at the levels he's dealing at it with.
Yeah, no, for sure. Also, I know that you have a creative side, don't you? So tell us more about what you do on the side that you have that outlet.
Yeah, I'm a musician. I'm a drummer. Some musicians argue drummers aren't musicians, but I'm a musician, and I'm lucky to live in Vegas where I get to play music with incredible artists, and so I make an effort to play professionally a few times a month. It used to be more, but there's a startup in the way right now, so I've got to focus on that. So I do that, and then I have my Makers and Jam podcast, which really combines business and music. So I interview people who have varied backgrounds, but they have some form of musical background. and I interview them from behind a drum set, and we talk about their life and their experience, and then we jam with them and play some songs with them. So we had this one person who was an attorney, and she was actually a singer, and she was an attorney, and the way she blew off steam is she went to Disneyland, and so we played a couple of Disney songs with her, and it was pretty fun. So.
That's cool. That's cool. So I guess you might not see the balance at work, but you are seeing it in life, right? You've got the creative blend as well.
Yes, and I enjoy it, and it's actually a good way for me to shut down work and just do something completely different.
Reflecting back on your journey, what is something that you have found to be a challenge in your personal life or in your business?
So for me, I have ADHD, and I don't hide it. It is what it is. It's actually a double-edged sword, I think, because it gives you a lot of creativity, but it also hinders you when it comes to executing. And so I really work, I think, harder than most to balance that piece of it out so that I can actually finish on time and do things that need to get done. And these are things that people who usually have ADHD kind of suffer from, right? So, but I think if you flip the narrative, it's actually a superpower, because it's what lets you come up with some really grand ideas and move forward with them.
So what does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
So for me, I have one of my coaches would call me a mantra guy. I have a few mantras,
okay,
and I pick them up here and there reading. One of them is from a book that I read. It's called Extreme Ownership. But the one mantra I have every morning is I get up in the morning and I prioritize and I execute. And so what I do is I keep a little sticky. I put 3 things on there, and regardless of what happens during the day, my day isn't over until those 3 tasks are completed.
Oh, wow.
And typically they're tasks that have to move the business forward. So I look at in the morning, I go, okay, what do I have to do to make sure that, we've got money in the bank, that customers are selling, and that product is being delivered. And I typically look and see what the most important tasks are. And those are the things I focus on. Now, we'll all do a million things during the day, but at whenever time it is, if I look at that sticky and it's still on my monitor, and if it's not checked off, if one thing isn't checked off, I'm not done for the night until it is. So that's one way I've been actually dealing with it, which has been pretty good. And the other mantra is just focus on solutions, not problems. Any entrepreneur is going to get thrown a million problems. You're basically a firefighter of sorts, right?
Yeah.
And you could either dwell on what happened and why it happened, or you could figure out why it happened and go and fix it and focus on that. So those are the 2 things that I literally tell myself daily.
So you've started several companies, haven't you?
I have.
Yeah. So what's something that didn't go as planned, and what did that experience teach you?
I've had a few things not go as planned, and they talk about failures being lessons only if you learn from them. Otherwise,
Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest ones, and I think anybody who's an entrepreneur should be wary of this, is there's good money and bad money, and by that I mean there are people who will invest in your company who will have the ability, the contacts, the network to help it grow and sell it. And there are people who will invest in your money because they're looking for an opportunity to take something. And I unfortunately took some capital in one of the businesses that ended up coming with some really bad terms, and it ended up costing me that business. And so that's one of the lessons I moved forward with. And this company could have been even better capitalized earlier on, but we walked away from investments because the terms were just too egregious. And it hurt. It hurt really bad, because that meant I had to finance, growth, and I had to finance a runway and things like that. But I've been on the other end to see what happens when you bring the wrong people in just because you need capital.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the biggest lessons I've been trying to avoid, or one of the biggest mistakes I've been trying to avoid and not do again.
So how would you have done things differently?
I would have probably bootstrapped a little bit longer and looked for the right investor, which is what we did on this one. We capitalized this externally probably 6 months or 8 months later than we wanted to, but at least we had the right group of investors who have all been able to add value by bringing in clients and doing a lot more for us. So that's one. And the other is people. You're only as good as your people. So put the right people in the right seats. Don't just bring in a friend because they need a job, or hire somebody because there's somebody said, oh, hey, they might be able to do it. Find the right people for the right jobs. and just know that you're only as good as the team.
What is your leadership style?
I give you enough rope to hang yourself. I really, really do. Maybe too much rope, but I don't micromanage. The way I look at it is, we're all adults, and we're all here for the same reason, and that's one of the things I look for. I don't look for people who just need a paycheck. I look for people who believe in the vision and the business, and aren't here just for the money. And that's another mistake I'd made in the past. I'd brought people who were literally, just looking for the money, and they didn't really care. They could have sold anything, right? It didn't matter. And I think that in itself lends itself to creating a whole host of leaders, because they care just as much as you do. They're going to do things. They're going to go that extra mile that most people who are just looking for a paycheck aren't.
Yeah. How do you spot the people that are going to be a good fit for the company, as opposed to the ones who are just looking for a paycheck?
I think you just listen. You listen to what's important. You ask them good questions. You ask them about what's important to them. And I had to make a decision last quarter on bringing a salesperson, and I actually took the least qualified salesperson, because she had more drive and passion about what we were doing than the qualified salesperson. And you know what? It's showing. She's a few months in, and she's doing phenomenally well. Just ask questions and listen and see what they have to say.
Yeah.
They'll tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it becomes quite apparent in time as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Amer, I wanted to ask about your growing up years. What was that like? Who were some of the influences in your life?
Yeah. So I had quite a few in different parts of my life. My mom was the biggest influence in my life. She was the one who literally said, don't set limits, and you can do whatever you want in your lifetime, which I think was a really good way to raise a kid. So that, she was the biggest influence for sure. But along the way, I had some really great influences. I had some football coaches that were great influences. I had a math professor that really helped me think outside the box. We were doing mathematics in 3 different ways: numerically, symbolically, and graphically. And that little piece of math that we used to do 3 different ways made me realize there's always a different approach to the same problem. So if you can't figure out in one way, go look at it a different way. And that was a really, really big life lesson for me. And then, I was a musician, so I had these musical influences, and one of mine was Neil Peart, who happened to be an exceptional writer in addition to just the most amazing drummer. And so that had me lean into writing and doing things that don't necessarily most musicians wouldn't do. So I've had some varied influences, from musicians to teachers, to my mother. But they've all kind of helped build who I am today.
You mentioned football coaches and math professor. I'm interested to know what about them, other than, the things they were teaching you, but what about their character was it that drew you?
I think there are parallels to life that people don't look at if they're just looking at the sport. I can't tell you how many times I was on a football field and I just wanted to stop running, but I didn't. Those were some of the lessons that I learned from the football coaches. The math professor, on the other hand, I think the biggest life lesson I got out of him was, look, just because you can't solve a problem heading into it doesn't mean it's not solvable. Take a different approach, take a different angle. And that was a really big lesson, because now whenever I have problems in my life period, whether it's business or personal, I kind of just take a step back and I look at all the options. And I think not enough people do that. Most people think there's only one way to solve a problem, and it's just not true. And I think that was a really, really big influence and lesson on for me.
I agree. I think we do become kind of tunnel vision, don't we, when we're solving problems, especially when it's a repeatable problem that keeps coming up. And how?
Well, let's talk about capital raising, because that's most businesses fail because they lose their runway, and everyone goes, well, I've got to go raise money, which is what we do, right? But depending on the product, you could go get a grant. There are entire companies funded off grants. That's a second option, right? You could look for a strategic partner who could be a reseller and actually fund you with a large order. Yeah. So there's other ways to do it, but everybody's always thinking, well, I've got to go raise capital. I've got to go raise capital. There are many ways to do it, and most people just don't really take a step back and get creative with it.
Yeah, or they're copying the next person.
That's the other problem, that they're seeing, a lot of entrepreneurs see the wildly huge success stories because they make for better media. They don't see what the average entrepreneur goes through, which is a lot of grind and a lot of hustle. And, the returns aren't necessarily 10 or 20x. The returns are, hey, we've got a business and we've been profitable for 10 years and we're running it and we're doing a great job at it.
There was somebody I was listening to a few days ago. They were talking about being curious. So when you're stuck in some kind of problem and like you're saying, you're trying to find a solution, instead of looking necessarily outward for it, be curious about what it is that is keeping you stuck there and try and find the answers from that angle as well, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, I know that is interesting. I think curiosity as a term is kind of the mantra of any entrepreneur. Most people start a business because they're trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
There are others who'll start up, PE or something because they want to go buy and sell businesses and do something different. But most entrepreneurs are curious and they're trying to solve a problem, which is why they end up doing what they're doing.
You've mentioned your business quite a bit. Tell us how you got it started.
Yeah, Lucihub is it's an interesting one because it's the combination of everything I've ever done in my career. So Lucihub is an AI-powered video production platform. It's tech and people, and it's really a tech-powered managed service, which sounds weird, but we can do things that most agencies can't do at the speed we do it in or at the levels we do it in. But it's connecting the dots between me being an engineer, me being a filmmaker, and me being in global consulting,
right,
and packaging all that into one business. So it's literally the combination of everything. But it started because I was sitting with an agency executive who said, we spend thousands of dollars on video production, and by the time we get our content back, it's irrelevant. And so if you look at the demand for video content today and the way it's being developed, not much has changed in the way professional content is being developed. There's still a really long cycle to get something from idea to completion. And so I set out to change the way that's being done. And so we created this next generation platform that empowers and enables the brands to do a lot of the pre-production work. And then our teams bring it to the finish line. And so, you can come up with an idea today, Sadaf, and you could sit down on our tools and use our AI tools to create your scripts and your shot lists and your voiceovers and all that pre-production stuff, film your content, and then push it into a professional post back, and it gets done in 72 hours.
Wow.
And so it's really a lot of industries mashed up into one to make it work. So, and that's how Lucihub started.
Yeah. No, that's very cool, actually, listening to how it encapsulates all of the dots that you've been involved in. So you've got the tech side, the engineering side, and the creative side.
Yeah, and the creative side. It's been a fun journey. It's probably been the most exciting out of everything I've done.
Yeah.
And it's great to see how we're solving real challenges for businesses who come to us and say, we would have never been able to afford to do all of this work if it wasn't for your organization or your product, because the traditional model is incredibly expensive. So you have two options. You can hire professional production teams, and it's really expensive to get that work done. Or you can use one of a million AI-based DIY tools out there today, but that means your time.
Yeah.
And so we kind of sit at the intersection of both of those, and we say, look, you can put in a little bit of time, and we'll do the rest. And you don't have to pay those exorbitant amounts. You'll pay a little bit to get the work done. So,
yeah.
So it's been really nice to see businesses adopt us and start using us and just do projects that they would have never done before.
Yeah, it does sound very cool, and I would like to check it out. Going back to what we were talking about at the beginning about you wanting to talk to George Lucas about how he would balance the work side of things, the tech side of things with the creativity side of things. Yeah. How do you see that playing out for yourself?
Yeah, we're going into year 3 now of Lucihub. In year 1, it was me and a couple of engineers and a couple of production people. That was the team. And we actually built and threw away 3 products before we settled on what Lucihub is today. So I was very involved. I was very involved in everything from ideation to how we architected the back end to make it more efficient, to the user experience design. And so I was very involved. Today, it's really about me talking to customers and finding gaps in the product we have and the gaps in what the customers need, and basically being able to come up with an idea and then put that to the team and say, guys, this is where we really need to take this, and let them execute on it. So I'm still involved, but I'm involved at a much higher level than I was 2 years ago.
How do you recharge your batteries with such a varied career and with all that you've got on your plate? How do you maintain that energy across all those roles?
I used to never do this, but I make it a point to just shut down at
Mm,
least for a half a day on a weekend somewhere and just
okay.
do a whole lot of nothing. I also go back to my music, so
Mm,
I'll grab a guitar and just strum away and write a song, or sit behind the piano, or go sit behind the drums. But I'll do something, and I'll just make sure that the laptop doesn't get open for at least a half a day, if not a whole
yeah,
day,
right.
and that's kind of how I recharge.
So you switch off from the emails
Yeah,
and the
and
calls.
it's funny because people are like, why don't you take a vacation? Well, I'm on a plane almost every week. So the last thing I want to do is get on a
Mm,
plane when I don't have to be on a plane.
yeah.
So it's really being home and just kind of having my own time.
How does the music play a role in your emotional well-being?
Well, I mean, drums, it's very, drums can be a great thing. It's like a workout every time if you play the right stuff. So
Yeah.
that's one. And then actually songwriting, which is something I didn't do
Hmm.
until about 5 years ago, is a really cool way to just bring out thoughts and ideas and just it's some people journal. I
Yeah.
think writing songs is very similar. It's just you
Yeah.
have to journal and rhyme at the same time.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I've got a journal with a bunch of lyrics in it. Some of them will never go anywhere. Some of them will
Yeah.
turn into songs,
Yeah.
but they're a way I put ideas down. And then I have an idea book as well. And if I come up with some idea, I'll just jot it down there. And I may not
Hmm.
look at it for years.
Yeah.
It just shows kind of all these ideas, and sometimes I've added it to a business. Sometimes I've shared
Mhm.
it with somebody else to go do, and but that's kind of what I do.
I think writing is so powerful. Just it could be journaling or it could be ideas, whatever it is you're doing. I think being able to process in that way is really powerful and helpful.
Yeah, and then exercise too. I
Yeah.
try to work out at least 3-4 days a week if I
Yeah.
can. I think that's a really great thing to do.
Hmm.
Believe it or not, I mean, people do yoga. I don't really do yoga, but I do a lot of stretching and just
Yeah.
some downtime, and something that's simple as just stretching for 5 minutes is pretty relaxing.
And we're looking back at your journey. What does growth mean for you today?
I think growth for me isn't about a particular entity or business. It's about the whole self. It's about me as an individual.
Mm.
And for me, it's constantly learning. I think, as you get further on in your career and your life, this notion of being irrelevant is a reality.
Mm.
And so, I have some friends who are using the same techniques to run their business that they did 20 years ago.
Mm.
And, I don't want to be that guy. I want to be able to I always want to be forward looking, and I want to be adapting and changing constantly. That's what growth means to me. I think where you're going with that was that always the case, and it wasn't.
How did you know I was going to ask that?
Made sense. No, it took some awakening, I think,
Mm.
to realize that I was kind of being stagnant in the same rut. The definition of insanity is doing something over and over again, expecting a different
Hmm.
result, or doing the same thing over and over again. Well, I had this aha moment one day that things aren't working for me the way I want them to because I'm not changing the way that I'm working at them.
Hmm.
That was kind of the moment where I decided to start doing things differently and just look at all aspects of my life and see how I could grow in all aspects of my life.
Yeah. So are you happy to share what it was like before and what was it that changed you?
I think I had forgotten a lot of what I'd learned. It's one thing to read a book or have a life lesson or fail forward in a business. It's another to apply it. And
Mm.
I never really took the steps back to apply it. And so one day I looked back and I go, why did all these things not work, whether they were personal or business? And the common denominator was me. They
Mm.
didn't work because I made these decisions several times and didn't learn from them. I didn't make these decisions several times that I should have made. I didn't make an investment in myself and learning this, this, and this. And so that was the aha moment for me. It was like, okay, well, if you really want things to work out the way you want them, then you have to be willing to change as well and grow, to have your life and your business and your relationships grow. So that was
Hmm.
the kind of the aha moment for me.
You talked earlier about the influences like your mom, your football coaches, your
Yeah.
math professor. music, so on and so forth. So some of those lessons that you learned early on from those influences, did you feel like you kind of strayed from
Oh, I
those?
did, without a doubt. The math one is the best one because the
Yeah.
math one always taught me there's multiple ways to approach a problem.
Mm.
I took a sledgehammer to, a thumbtack. And so I'd forgotten those lessons. I literally had to go relearn these lessons that I'd
Yeah.
had in my career and take a step back and say, you knew this, you just didn't apply it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, great question. And I did. I forgot some of those lessons.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can see that, it's easy for it to happen to anyone to kind of stray from some of the things that are our core values.
Yeah.
And then to be able to find the way back and to be able to use that for growth is fantastic.
Yeah. It took a while, but it's finally there. It doesn't stop,
No.
it's a constant.
Yeah. And I was also like listening to you talk, it sounds like you're very much about moving forward and moving forward in a way that focuses on growth, not just for your business, but for you as a person.
Yeah, I have another saying: don't live your life with a rearview mirror. Learn your lessons and just move forward. Just look
Yeah.
forward. I
Yeah.
think too many people just dwell on the past, whether it was good or bad, and forget that there's a whole blank canvas that needs to be painted or written or whatever you want to say. I think they just focus too much on the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has a lot to do with your perspective or attitude towards your failures and how you choose to respond to those, isn't it?
And I would tell people, say, "Oh, you've had some failures," and I'm honest, they weren't failures; they were disasters, just disasters in every way, financially, relationship wise, everything. They were pretty big disasters.
Yeah.
And you've got to. And I don't know why I'm doing it again. You'd think you'd learn after the fourth or fifth time, but at least I learned after the last one to not apply those same lessons and actually move forward. And things have worked a lot better in the last two companies.
Fantastic. So where do you see personal growth for yourself looking forward?
I think personal growth for me means just being a better human, treating others the way I want to be treated, making the right decisions, not just the right decisions for me. You have a lot of leaders who will make decisions that are self-serving in an organization at the risk or at the expense of their employees.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be that guy. I've seen that happen too many times. So that's personal growth for me, is just being the best I can be every year and making sure that I'm the best to the people around me.
That's awesome. If you could go back and give advice to yourself at the start of your entrepreneurial journey, what would you say?
I'd say learn from the failures faster. don't actually analyze them and apply your lessons, because I had a lot early on in life that I could have learned from, but I repeated the same cycle, and that was costly in some sense.
Amer, thank you for sharing that. How do people reach out to you?
You can find me you can find lucihub.com, lucihub.com. That's where the business is. You can find me personally on LinkedIn. Amer T is my LinkedIn ID, I think. And then you can find my podcast on YouTube and Spotify. It's Makers and Jam. So it's Makers with the letter N, Jam. Yeah. And you can follow my drumming on Instagram at at.drums. So
awesome.
Depends on what you're interested in.
That's great. Thank you. So we will link to Amer's info in the show notes, which you can get along with the transcript at pushtobemore.com. Awesome. Amer, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real privilege.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, that's a wrap on another great conversation. A massive thanks to Amer for joining us and sharing a part of his inspiring journey. For transcript or show notes, do swing by our website, pushtobemore.com. A big thanks to today's sponsor, PodJunction, for all the change makers out there and who are contemplating podcasting as your new vehicle of expression and connection. Definitely connect with us at podjunction.com. Don't forget to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts, because we've got some seriously compelling conversations coming up, and we really don't want you to miss any of them. So from Amer and from me, thanks for joining in. Have an awesome week, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.